Hello, fellow travelers. I'm John, and today we begin our journey in Southeast Asia, Laos, a country shaped by thousands of years of history, where traditions have been passed down long before modern borders ever existed. Life here moves at a slower pace. The history isn't something kept in the past, it's part of everyday life. At the heart of northern Laos is one of the oldest towns in the country. It's a place where culture, nature, and history come together, inviting visitors to slow down and take it all in. During our time here, we'll explore the town, take in the scenery, and experience some of the places that make this area so meaningful. Let me show you where we will begin. Right below China, and just left of some of the countries that we have been talking about already, is the country of Laos. So now that we know where we're headed, let's grab our passports and let's get started. Good morning, fellow travelers. We have flown out of Bangkok this morning to the country of Laos, and we've just arrived here at our wonderful little residence, a very quiet, converted colonial home into a guest house, and we could not be more excited about staying in. It's a beautiful place here, just right off of a very quiet street in the city of Luang Prabang. This is an older residence that's been converted into a guest house. Near as I can tell, it only has 6 rooms, and they were just beautifully decorated, had these beautiful gardens, and of course nothing would do but Claudia get her picture taken with the gardener. One of the most interesting things about this little place is just magnificent surroundings. Everywhere that we went in the gardens, we would just be surprised that we'd all of a sudden look down and there would be this big white rabbit. I don't know how many there were, but there were lots of them. And they'd just be lying in the foliage, and just what a great surprise. That was. So the first thing we did was go to a ceremony. It was a Laotian ceremony of welcome. Apparently it was like the most religious sort of welcome for visitors. And as you can see here, they would tie these banners on our wrist. This ceremony is very special, and it's done for like birthdays, weddings, funerals, and to welcome guests. This was a very special time. This was a surprise. The next morning we got up very early. They had us dress up a little bit, and as you can see, we were wearing these scarves over our shoulders, and we were barefooted and standing on these mats. And this was a daily event, and what it was is you were feeding the monks. As you can see them lined up down the street. Down here, the line was pretty much all the way out of sight. And every day these monks get up in the morning and they come through the village, and the village basically feeds these monks and these novices. And so as they pass by, you give them food. We had already very early in the morning gone to the market and bought these big baskets of rice, and then we would dip this out as they came by. We were told by our guide there that when they would get back to the monastery, they would pour all this food, whatever it was, meat, fish, rice, out into a big area, and they'd mix it all up and they'd divide it equally. And our guide had been a monk and had decided that wasn't what he wanted to do, so he was able to tell us a lot about this. But if you didn't get up in the morning and go to participate in this, you didn't get anything to eat that day. So I guess everybody got up and got out and got their portion of the rice. It was quite an interesting thing. I'd never seen anything like it, and of course we were fascinated by that. After breakfast that morning, we went to a farm, and as you can see here, the sign, it was called the Living Land Company, and it was a rice farm that they were showing us how rice was planted and all that type of thing. And so these are some of the rice fields that were there on that farm. Of course, the land was plowed by these water buffaloes, and nothing would do but I'd have to try my hand at that. And so you can see a little bit of desperation in my face, holding on to this rascal with 2 hands there. It didn't take too long to get the hang of it. Of course, the big old water buffalo was doing the heavy lifting, as you might imagine. We would pull this rice out of this bed. This would be the seed rice, and we would pull that up, and then my guide was showing me how we would plant this kind of sort of in rows, as you might look at it right there. And so we'd stick it in the ground in this land that we had just plowed up. getting to make some time and get along pretty good with keeping up with him. So pretty soon we had our little field pretty well planted. Of course, I was a mess and had to get washed up. And one of the things I was so fascinated, everything just about in this country is made out of bamboo. The place where you showered off your legs and got cleaned up, you can tell it's that bamboo with just holes in it. You can see the water dripping out there. So got all cleaned up, and then this is what this rice looks like as it grows and becomes mature. Beautiful scenery and all. This farm was used to demonstrate how these people basically live, and that fellow there that's pumping that sticks up and down is actually a forge, and he's blowing air on that charcoal with this forge. And here again, all this is made out of like bamboo. So you can tell that as the air goes down into this forge, it's heating up that charcoal. Then the fella can hammer it out and make these sickles sharper. The farm is a working farm, and basically what they're doing is growing all types of vegetables and everything for the restaurants, just for sale at the market. It was just fascinating to see this working farm in process. I couldn't help but take a couple of pictures of this right here because I wanted you to see, we think we're so industrialized. I want you to look at these gears. I'll call them helical gears. We actually use them in our business even today. These, however, are made of wood. And if you can imagine, whoever thought up the design of that and made it and carved it so that when those gears turn, they're basically crushing sugar cane and getting the syrup out of it. But I couldn't stand not showing you, we think we're so technologically advanced, and I don't know how old that was, but it was old, and it was very, very cleverly designed. A little bit late on in the morning, we went to a weaver's village. They were dyeing all of this, I'm gonna call it straw or strips of bamboo. I'm not exactly sure exactly what, and maybe it was several different types of product there, but you can see how they were dyeing it these different colors, and they would cut it into these lengths and binding it up, and then they were making these baskets out of it. I really thought they were very attractive. I would have liked to have brought some home, but they were kind of bulky, and I didn't think we'd make it home, with them, but they were doing a nice job of it. We enjoyed going to that village. That next day, we went to a place called Sea Falls. It's a natural falls area, and it was sort of like a little state park, beautifully done. It was clearly a very popular tourist attraction. And this water was just naturally moving down through this little valley. I couldn't help but take a picture of this sign where it was talking about covering up and practicing some modesty. The next sign, you wasn't being obeyed too much here. All these young people were having a grand time, very much like you would think of like a state park here is in the United States. Even enjoying a street food, and this fish and chicken, of course, looked very, very good, but you always remember what I said, don't eat the street food. That's my constant theme is look, but don't touch. Not too far outside of that little park was this very, very long bamboo bridge. I just could not help but decide I was going to have to go across it. Yeah, I actually had to pay something equivalent of about a nickel to go across the bridge. It was a toll bridge. And then once I got out on that thing and looked down, I was just standing on these little slats down at this river. And by the way, this is the Mekong River. It's pretty good size. And you can tell it was flowing pretty good. And just to see how these people had made this out of bamboo and anchored it with rocks. Once I got out on that thing, about in the middle, I kind of wish maybe I hadn't paid my nickel. Glad to kind of get back on shore. Later on that day, we went basically to the palace, the royal palace, and of course it was very ornate. The palace is not where people live anymore. It's pretty much on display. But it's a beautiful palace. See the local people, the way they dress and that type of thing. And still very much a place, these temples where people will worship. And at some point in time, all the way around that semicircle right there, they would light those candles, and toward the evening, it was pretty spectacular. Of course, everything is attended by these monks. I'll have to show you my favorite picture of the royal palace. I couldn't pass this one up. The next morning, we went and visited a Buddhist monk school, and this is basically the only education for like boys. They never talk much about the girls. You start this process when you're old enough. The most interesting thing our guide told us, and he had been a student here, is that the way they tell when you are able to start school, a little child can take his arm, reach over the top of his head, and touch his ear. Now, if you try that now, it's no problem with an adult, but apparently somewhere around 5 or 6 years old is when a young boy can actually put his arm over his head and touch his ear, and that's how they decide when you're gonna, start school. The teacher there at the school, of course, we enjoyed visiting, talking with him. It was interesting to know that there is no school except, going to this monk school. I'd love to know what they would say about the ladies or girls. Anyway, this is our guide we had there, and he had been a novice and a monk, and he decided that really wasn't for him, so he became a tour guide, and he was excellent. He did a really good job. The next morning early, we went to the market. This was a second visit there, where we went and got our rice to do the morning ceremony, for the monks. It was beautifully done. It was a huge market. And of course, you kind of have to feel like there wasn't a lot of refrigeration and that kind of thing. So everybody would go and get whatever they were going to do that day. There were ducks and fish, and I was told these were like rats out of the marsh that had been some kind of way processed. I didn't like the looks of that too good. And all type of mushrooms, beans, dried this and that. It was a very popular place, very busy place, and all these people were coming, to buy, fish. Our guide told us that all this seafood comes out of the Mekong River, and you can see some really gigantic chunks of catfish. That seemed to be a popular item. All types of fruits and vegetables were being, cut up and prepared and sold. And then I never did get the straight of the story about what these little birds were, what they were sold for, and what they did. I hope they weren't something that people ate, but they were all in pairs. I wish I'd asked a little bit more about what the deal was with that. But late that afternoon, we started on a sunset cruise, and this is the Mekong River. We took a pretty long trip up the river. Of course, all along the banks, people live on these boats on the Mekong River, and it's just a center of a lot of activity, so we enjoyed that river cruise. And beautiful boats. I'm kind of a boat person, so I like to take pictures of beautifully made boats, and I'm assuming they were all handmade, but I thought they were attractive. And then as I started getting toward the evening, our cruise began to come to an end. And then, of course, this was at sunset, end of our little trip to Laos. Hope you've enjoyed this trip with me. What a memorable visit this has been here in Laos. From the peaceful streets to the layers of history and culture that shape daily life. Whether walking through the town or taking in important landmarks, this is a place that invites you to slow down and appreciate the moment. I'm grateful you joined us as one of our co-travelers. On our next journey, we'll continue exploring new places and sharing stories from around the world, with more meaningful moments still ahead. In the meantime, if you'd like more stories from the great outdoors, be sure to visit my Amazon channel and explore my books. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll be the first to join me when our next adventure begins. Until then, keep making memories with the people you cherish the most. And remember, life's best moments are found in the outdoor adventures. Let's keep exploring this amazing world together.